Hello and welcome to this week's episode of What It Means to Be Human with me, Kate Sterling, and a slightly different setup today, slightly different episode planned because there are some pretty major sound issues on the episode that I was about to, that I have released and have now taken down to do a new episode because I listened back to it and I thought, do you know what, I thought I'd managed to make it good enough, and actually there's too many distractions in the sound. And the irony is that I've just started recording this podcast and I realised that the sound also wasn't working. So it's always a good reminder to double check all of these things before we even get cracking on with everything. But I wanted to come and do an episode today because about 20 minutes ago, I was just thinking, my gosh, my daughter's coming home in 2 hours. How can I best spend that time? What's going to help me feel really fulfilled when she comes home? Because this has become a little bit of the thinking of parenthood alongside working for myself and building out all the things I want to keep building whilst also remaining creatively fulfilled. And I was like, God, I can't really be bothered to get dressed properly. So I'll just put on a film in the background and do some other bits. And I was like, do you know what am I avoiding in that? And I think part of what I'm avoiding a lot of the time, and I don't know if you can relate, and it's why I'm doing this podcast episode today, all around just this messy middle part of this journey and this chapter of navigating cancer, processing dad dying 6 weeks ago, and also kind of this new awakening to ambition in motherhood as a result of all of this stuff. And I was speaking to someone yesterday about not relaunching everything with my business and my work, but kind of walking back into the room after all of this time with the new intention that I want to set for the work going forwards, for this podcast, for Club Thrive, for my coaching, but also for the work I want to still do as an actor. Now, it's so layered and complicated, all of this. And part of the reason that I've kind of just set the podcast up like this today is that I had always said, I can't find the episode in the previous Club 5 episodes, but I had always said that I would love to knock Stephen off his top Diary of a CEO spot, because there's always been this gripe that I've had with how the concept of high performance and achieving our best and being our best selves and being in the top kind of percentile of things and the percentage of stuff has been so kind of dehumanized. It's become so about the end product or the end look or the end result that it completely doesn't allow the individuals to be human in the process. And for whatever reason, I cannot find that episode, but I know that I've said it somewhere. And it's really tricky because it's essentially trying to resell the idea of something like high performance or even wellness or fulfilling potential and the concept of that, but going against the grain of how that is always shown. Because there is an assumption that in order to be the best, to be successful, to be top of the field, it's going to require insane sacrifice. Now, it doesn't mean that sacrifice is not a part of the process of fulfilling potential, being your best, achieving what you want. But it doesn't have to mean that the process of all of that is horrific. It doesn't have to mean the 5 a.m. ice baths. It doesn't have to mean running a marathon. It can mean these things, but only if it actually gives you more than what it takes to organise or to do. And when I became a mum, I thought extremely naively, because I've been freelance my whole life, I will just have a child and they will slot into my life and I will adapt around it. And yes, I will organise my career and everything to be the parent that does the drop-off and the pickups and to be there at school holiday time. But that completely assumes that all of the responsibility of the parenting is on my shoulders. Now, before I go any further in this, because more of what I'm going to talk about this year is about things like the subliminal messaging of hierarchy in our society and the unconscious hierarchy of patriarchy and how that impacts all of us, but also not just women, how it also impacts men. And part of the challenge that I've had over the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you can see the 4, my daughter turned 4, is that all of this does not just impact women, and it doesn't just impact men. And whatever gender you are, please please see yourself in what I talk about from whatever your gender or identity, because really this is about being human. Part of the challenge I have found is that in order to sell ourselves and to market ourselves, we need to be specific so that people know what we are selling, so that you can sell what you sell. And even whether you're a creative or you're a business owner, we're all selling stuff, right? Even as an actor, you're selling something, you're selling yourself. But we can end up shaping ourselves to be like someone else, to fit a mold, or to think, to fit what we think people need or want from us. And that just ever so slightly changes who we are day by day, bit by bit, like 1% by 1%, just enough to take us off the path of who we truly are. And that's why we end up burning out. It's why we end up unwell mentally. It's why we end up unfulfilled. It's why we end up sometimes creating success that doesn't feel good. We're always like, why is this still not enough? Like, I've got all of the things. I was watching the Molly May documentary, and there's an amazing scene in it where she loses her mind over a pizza, in an oven not cooking the pizza properly. And I actually shared this clip on my social media, on my Kate Sterling page. And the comments were fascinating. Some people were really like, I totally get this. I've been there. It just really humanises her, which was the intention of it. And other people were like, oh, woe is her. Look at everything that she needs to handle stress better. And it's fascinating, right? Because what we think we become and what we judge, we deny ourselves. So wherever we judge someone else, we are not allowing ourselves to be that version of a person because we are associating it with negativity in some way. And what I really wanted to do was to share with compassion that we can all be like Molly May, whether you have millions of pounds coming in through your company or literally like I am right now, back to the bare bones of like £200 coming in every single month because work has had to take a back seat for chemotherapy and for cancer treatments and for the whole diagnosis of this whole thing. It's taken 6 months. But that pizza moment of her losing her shit at the oven is exactly the same as me in this flat losing my temper at the oven as well. Because as humans, we experience things on the same physiological level, regardless of the scenario. So it's just that our ability to handle stress reaches a tipping point, whether that's, on earning 200 quid a month or the pressures of earning 200 million pounds a month. As individuals, when the pressure points align in such a way, it means that we experience that on the same level as the next person. We are so much more similar than what we realise. And the reason that I now feel able to talk about all of this is that I'm kind of out of the other side of understanding a lot of the impact that, for example, having a child can have. And today, when I was kind of thinking, my God, what am I going to do with my time, which ends up not using that time, I was like, I'm going to come and just do this podcast episode and be incredibly honest about where things are at, but also with the intention to help you keep moving forwards. Because ultimately, I don't want to keep creating content just for the sake of creating content. The whole idea really is to try and keep sparking those ideas and the belief in you to keep doing what you want with your life, to keep honouring your emotional needs as a human being, to keep facing up to your mental health challenges, and to keep acknowledging all of this as part of a much bigger ecosystem of you as an energetic being in alignment with everything else, because everything is energy, whether it's time, money, energy, love, fulfillment, purpose. It's an exchange of energy. We burn out because we are expending more than we are receiving. But we are the ones that block sometimes what we can receive, right? Whether that's with money or with love, or I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve it. All of this stuff comes into it. And yesterday, I was speaking to someone about all of this, about how do I organise this time in the best way to, for example, start my emails back up again with the intention of what I want to do with the podcast, with Dare to Be Seen, my group programme, with Club Thrive, with my coaching, because I've had to put it all down. And so there's this real what do I do now? Which is a pause. And yeah, I'm also not doing anything. And there can be huge fear in pausing and slowing down and just being gentle. But we have to be gentle in our bodies and in our breath to allow that inner stuff that we carry to come up. Your subconscious, your emotions, your fears, your anxieties. We need to allow them to be a part of all of this. So today, I am going to do this episode as I already have done, kind of just sharing where things are at, but also with the idea of giving you some nuggets of why it's important that we acknowledge all of this stuff because it impacts us all. And as I went off on that tangent, part of my thing has been do I just focus on the ADHD thing? Do I focus on motherhood? Do I focus on parenting? Do I focus on potential? But this is the whole human experience, and we cannot just talk about it as a singular gender. Yes, of course, as individual genders, we have our own stereotypes, we have our own blocks, we have our own conditioning. So that's incredibly important to acknowledge. But nothing happens in a vacuum. So we are always responding to one another, just like in a family. And so when I launched Club Thrive, for example, and it was going to be for women around self-belief and confidence, I hadn't reached the point in the kind of relationship and family dynamics where that had started to be a bit of a challenge. And I say this with why it's so important to talk about the impact of all of this for men as well. And for anyone who perhaps carries a more, stereotypical male leading role in a household, for example, because if we're taking gender out of it, it's important to acknowledge that. And whilst I might not always nuance that, this is where I get stuck. I just want everyone to feel included. You know, you are included. I just might not include every single gender as I talk, because I'll just keep having to caveat everything. So just know that everything comes with the caveat that you place yourself in this scenario in how we might, I guess, imprint or model family, image, life, identity on gender, if it's relevant. And to be honest, I've taken gender out a lot of all of this stuff just to come back to the crux of what it means to be human, because gender is just a part of it. And it's a label that we can put on, and it's important kind of in terms of identity, but really underneath that, there are individuals. There's you're human. You've got characteristics, and whether you're a man or a woman or non-binary or trans, it doesn't matter. You as a person is what matters at the crux of all of this. But I never expected having a child to be quite so challenging. And I never expected to be quite so taken aback by how it impacted relationships or how it impacted family dynamics, or even just the simple thing of organising work. And I say this with so much love for my partner. And it's really important I say this because, and likewise for family, because sometimes we can talk about family as a context, as a concept. And I'm always like, God, I really just want my family to know I'm really grateful for them. It's really complicated when we show up online or in a public sphere where we're trying to talk about things and, inspire change, and feel like I also don't want anyone that I know to feel like I'm talking about them. But that has held me back for years. And so, clock these thoughts yourself. This is why I share them, because I'm hoping that somehow you will suddenly realise that in some of this, you've also been holding back. Because ultimately, this is about something I have really realised over the last couple of months with all of this, with cancer and losing dad, that I had really been underplaying what I want from my life as well. Even though in those moments over the last couple of years, I haven't been. And this is where it's interesting, where we create our own glass ceilings, because we are doing our very, very best every day, right? And this is where the whole masculine or the whole force identity of performance and high performance is unhelpful, because it doesn't mean you keep pushing on when you're exhausted. It means you take the break and you have the glass of wine and you watch Netflix because you want to, not because you've deserved it or you've earned it. And this was something that I have spent decades unlearning to then relearn. In the freedom of life, you get the choice to design how you want your life to live. And there's going to be discomfort in that, because there's going to be ways that you've always lived and things that you've always done to get to where you are now, or to become the person that you are, that now feels weird to not do it like that. So it's also about acknowledging where the resistance is, whether it's physically. It's why the connection with your body is so important, with that hesitation, with where the breath starts to catch, with where the tightness starts to come in. That is a resistance. And if you're not in connection with your body, which means if you're not aware of that, you won't feel it. So this is why also facing up to things like body image, identity, our reflections, who we are as people, the shame, the low self-esteem, the self-loathing, the critical thoughts is incredibly important, because until you face those things, they're going to keep dictating how you live without you even realising it. That's the kind of, I need to spend an extra half an hour checking myself in the mirror before I leave the house because I don't feel worthy to leave yet. When you start to work on yourself in a way that isn't about doing the work in a horrible way, it's just acknowledging all of this stuff, you start to clear it away to then be like, oh yeah, I'm maybe not that happy with my periods, but whatever, I'm fine, let's go. It doesn't have such a weight on it, which is why the whole concept of the hidden hierarchy of patriarchy, which is a Substack I've started writing. So today part of my choice was like, do I go and finish that Substack, or do I come and talk about it? And with the ADHD and the racing of the thoughts, I'm going to come and talk about it, and then I can keep writing it and cementing it. The whole concept behind the hidden hierarchy of patriarchy is that we live in a hierarchical society, unconsciously a lot of the time. So we are brought up learning that we are to respect our elders, that people with money have status and are to be respected, or that teachers are people we listen to, or that men are valued more than women, or that people that look a certain way have more value because of beauty standards, or that in order to be approved of, you need to be, or to be liked, you need to act in a certain way. This is all part of the conditioning of it all, but it runs unconsciously. We're not told about it. We're not told you're learning this because of this. And in fact, it's probably only over the last couple of years really that a lot of this is being spoken about more and more online anyway, because look at the world, it's melting. And I think part of the challenge that I've had since becoming a parent was that I never expected to be so impacted by the global news. So that was another layer of kind of responsibility I felt like I took on. And I know that that's the ADHD and that's the neurodiversity. And that's why I'm also committed myself this year to talking more about the things that I want to shy away from, about neurodiversity, about my passion to be an actor still, about how you might be also having similar thoughts. Because unless we talk about it, we just keep shoving it down without realising it. And within that, there's family and there's the roles that we assume almost without realising it, whether that's in motherhood or as a father, right? Or as any parent. Because if you've got a family that's also relying on income, which we all are, and that pressure is also subliminally going into, for example, a man's head, oh, well, I must provide and I must do this and I must be that kind of version. But it's also coming at the detriment of their health and it's costing them more than what they are receiving back. That impacts family, which is why nothing happens in a vacuum. It's likewise if you've got a mum who's unhappy, who's stressed, who's just cracking on and saying, yeah, I can cope with no sleep, so I'll be the one that gets up in the night. Over time, that's going to wear down that mum. That's going to wear down you as an individual if you're that mum. And until we acknowledge it and communicate it, we just keep cracking on and then we get bitter and we get annoyed and then that creates friction and then that has another knock-on effect as well with whether it's relationships or friendships or social life or income. It starts to isolate you. And then there's also this kind of sense of freedom and wanting to still be the individuals that we are within the relationships and within these new identities, whether it is as a mum or through a breakup or having lost our jobs. And the reason I haven't kind of just been like, well, I'm just going to talk about motherhood is that, well, I don't want to also exclude women or men or anyone of any gender from the conversation who might benefit from this, because really it's not just about becoming a parent either. It's about the choice in between and that we can all still learn from one another and be inspired by one another, whether we have children or not. It's just that the challenges that we have as parents are wild and they might be as the same as the challenges as someone who decides not to have children who can't have children. And I don't want to exclude anyone from the conversation whilst also understanding that for some people, they might not want to listen to this either. So it's also about my discomfort in trying to accommodate everyone and just being like, actually, if I just keep talking about the things I care about and really no work, right, in terms of helping you fulfill your potential, then those of you that want to listen will listen and those of you that don't won't. And that's okay. But that's taken me a while to learn as well. Because I think there's been a massive resistance that I've had, that I've discovered in all of this, to really owning the fact that as an individual, I am highly capable, highly intelligent, have huge capacity, and I'm really hungry for challenge. I'm starving for challenge. I love it. Not starving for challenge, but you know what I mean. I mean that in the context of, I can also be very good at being like, I'm also fine. And so there are two sides to us often of what is true and what we are doing to maintain life, to survive, to keep the status quo, to keep things ticking over. And it can happen in a wave and it can happen in cycles. And it is part of this process of helping you and encouraging you to just clock all of this. Like the frustrations that we feel are because we are not getting what we need. They are because we are empty in some way. They are because we are not challenged and we're bored and we want to get out. And it's only by acknowledging this and by saying, well, why am I feeling like that? What am I doing? Who am I being that's not actually allowing myself to be free? That we can really start to understand what we need in our life, what you need in your life. And it's why I'm very conscious to be like, this is not about men or women. It's about humans as a whole, because we are all impacted by this, all of us. And you know, if we don't also then talk about male mental health, for example, then we are doing a disservice to both men, but also the families at home that are impacted by that. Because if there's shame associated with male mental health, then it's going to be harder for men to get support, which means that many partners at home or many partners in general or family or people that care are going to also be expending energy to try and help someone who feels unable to get help because there's so much shame associated with it. So we're all linked in this bigger cycle. And the more we talk about it, the less shame there is. And it's also not about telling people what to do, because we all have to come to these conclusions by ourselves. But what I have learned is that by talking about all of this more and more, then it plants the seeds and opens up a door for other people to explore it themselves without feeling so embarrassed about it, because so much of this is just covered in shame that we feel so embarrassed that we can't cope as people, or that we should be doing better, or that we're not happy with what we've got. so we don't talk about it. And yeah, sure, that's why we have therapy, that's why we have coaching, but it's also about just talking about these things in society with our friends and with our peers, and being able to talk about it without worrying that we're not going to get a job. You know, I went to update my Spotlight the other day, which is a CV, online CV for actors. And there's a whole tab on there now about, well, I think it's probably been there for a while, but, you know, if you want to put your neurodiversity, for example. So I ticked ADHD on it. And then it was like disabilities, ADHD, neurodiversity. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Is it a disability? Yes, it is a disability. But I don't know if I want to be labelled as disabled. So there's judgment there. It's not judgment, it's a stigma, right? There's a sense of discomfort in being less than. And this is why the hidden hierarchies of patriarchy are so important to talk about, because it is all about being less than or more than. So if you think about it, and I don't know if this is going to translate, I was going to have my little iPod, but I've forgotten it, iPad. So it's all about perception. The hidden hierarchies of life in general, linking into patriarchy, are that this is kind of like, let me draw it here. I've done a video on this before. So ignore that dot. This is like the less than, and this is the more than, right? So this is kind of like how we see women in society, and this is how men are seen in society. But then there's many other things that has the same scale. So disability would come into here, as would if you look a certain way in comparison to what the beauty industry says, or if you have a certain amount of things, for example, like if you come from a challenging background, or if you don't have much money. These are stereotypes, by the way. This is not what I think. This is just giving you how we see people. Or you have money and you have wealth. But then what also starts to happen is that, say, for example, you have been impacted by someone who has money and wealth negatively. You start to see that as a bad thing. So you start to see that as something that you don't want. So you'll also hard reject the idea of even having this sense of size, because it's safer to stay here, because you don't want to be associated with that because it's negative. Likewise, if you've been, for example, like say in the workplace, you've had a challenging experience with a female colleague even, and they have been seen as this bigger version. Maybe they're a boss, or maybe there's someone that's above you in a hierarchical sense of self. You're not going to want to become that size of person. You're not going to want to become a leader. You're not going to want to be that person because you're associating it with something negative. Likewise, right? We see female sports stars as this compared to the male sports stars because they're paid more. Likewise with celebrity in Hollywood. Women, men, because men are still paid more. So there is this disparity as well. And then this is also where we see, right, mums, women, because mums also all of a sudden don't look like they've got their shit together. They look messy and they're not with it, and they're cluttered. Whereas women that don't have children, don't get me wrong, obviously there's nuances, add your caveats in. But women that have got it together, that are successful in their career, that have, achieved certain things by a certain age, they get this status. So it's about status. But all of this happens in our minds without even clocking it. And the reason I'm going to keep talking about it is I did a workshop about this last year it was for the creative industries, but it was for any industry really. This is also how we see ourselves in relation to the industry, right? So if you are also, for example, an outsider, in inverted commas, of an industry, you're going to see yourself like this compared to this. I've put that down, this compared to this. There's always this disparity of size. Because if in an industry of any sort, you don't, for example, even in the creative industries or starting out and working for yourself, for example, and you see yourself here because you've never done it before, and you look at all the gurus that you're following as this, that's a massive gap. That's quite intimidating. So you also believe that they know more than you because they are bigger than you. But all of this, again, is happening unconsciously in your mind, which is why I'm going to keep harping on about it, because this is what stops us and this is what holds us back. This is what keeps you at home, keeping the peace, because whoever's earning the most money gets more status because of patriarchy in a family dynamic or any home environment, right? It's just anyone who earns more money in a patriarchal society has greater status than the person that doesn't. It is just it's just the conditioning. So it's only a problem if we don't acknowledge it, because also this individual here has different pressures to this person. But they also maybe start to devalue what this person is saying because they think, well, I've got the money and I'm working hard, so I need the rest. And a lot of this happens unconsciously. So we start to facilitate a lot of this ourselves as well. And it also means to say that this individual might start to feel like that's all they're there for, which then they start to shrink their sense of self-worth. So that can be going on all at the same time too. You can have someone that is like this, but feels like this inside. So it's about this recalibration of all of this in facing up to the hidden hierarchies of patriarchy in our individual selves, in our relationships, in how you are at home, but also how you are in the real world, right? Because even how we present ourselves, even how we look, this is why women end up getting loads of Botox, because they see themselves as this compared to the beauty industry. This is what happens when we have low self-esteem, because we end up thinking we need other things to be here. So really what also has to happen is that we have to build ourselves from this place up to match the circle to create equity in our society. But in order to do that, we have to start with ourselves. And we have to be truly honest about where we ourselves are not happy. And this is why I'm very, very, very passionate about this collaborative conversation about it not just being gender. This is where I got stuck with a lot of my work, because I do also care deeply about the challenges that women face, because I am someone that has had all of the challenges in relation to how little I saw myself. Whether it is the eating disorder or the depression that came after a divorce or the low self-esteem that led to other challenges, or the sense of, even just the ADHD stuff and how that impacts my sense of self. Like, who am I now? All of these things impact who you are. And I think especially when you are different, when you've never felt like you've belonged anywhere, and you are entrepreneurial, I do still very much believe that we all have our own individual nuances that need to be supported. Mums absolutely need different support to someone who doesn't have a child, because time is completely different. But it doesn't mean that we can't then see one another still as the individuals that we are and be inspired by one another and use that inspiration to help us to actually get what we want in our lives, which is what this all comes down to. Because really what I discovered over the last couple of years is that I've always lived intentionally, with authenticity, with genuine, absolute honesty. But over the last couple of years, there's been huge change with having a parent that had dementia. So that's taken up a huge amount of energy that I now have back, which is wild in itself. And I think the acknowledgement here is that I have always managed to put myself first, but there's always been other things that maybe I haven't done. So this is also where, perhaps, for example, with time, where you don't feel like you have the time to do a workout, for example, that you want to do, because work comes first, because in the undercurrent cycle of your thinking, money is the most important thing. This, again, is kind of the impact of the patriarchal society of hierarchy, right? But it's also about capitalism, and it's also about reality. So we don't want to pretend about these things. We just want to clock them. And we also want to clock the stories that we're telling ourselves about these things, to break the cycle of those stories, the beliefs, the feelings, the past experiences that are still feeding into the now. And when it comes to myself, I am ambitious. But when I became a mum, I felt like that was wrong. I think I misinterpreted a lot of what was being said online about ambitious mums, and that ambition was wrong. And so in doing that, I kind of think I put some of my dreams to bed a bit, because, in the family dynamics that we have as a creative family, it's not normal either. There is no consistent income, for example. So there's different stresses we all have as well. We all have completely different stresses. And the more we just remember this and clock it, the more freedom you will get to live the life that you want to live, because you will remember that no one else has life like you have it. And that gives you freedom, because in that reframe, you get to say, well, actually, that's great for them, but I'm going to get the same kind of feeling that they're getting from what it looks like they're living, and do it my way, so that you then get to live completely freely in yourself too, which gives you the freedom to earn what you want and also do the work that you love. But it requires conversation, and it requires you to be honest about the things that you're not happy with, and it requires those complicated moments, whether it is in relationships or friendships or partnerships or collaboration or whatever, to really be honest about what's not working. And I think I was trying to create my work in a way that was genuine, but I was held back by two things. One was my thinking that I needed to be the default parent, to do the pickups, the drop-offs, and be there at family holidays, because in the assumption that my partner might be off working, for example, because I also really want that for him. I really, really want my partner to love his work. And it's not fair to talk about what he wants because he's not here. And I do want to do a podcast with him because I think it's a really important conversation, and he's amazing, and has done so much to support our family. And I think it's really important to say that because there's this divide that's happening in society where it feels like it's one against another, and it's not. It's about this partnership for everyone, not just in our homes, but for the world, right? And for our children. It has a massive impact. So we've got to keep talking about it in a way that's really welcoming everyone's challenges into the conversation so that we can also hear them too. But there is this sense that I was creating work from a place of what needs to happen to make sense, and for money, and for arrangement of time around my child. And what this time has given me, and the second thing actually was that, just to share this in case it resonates for any of you that are coaches, when I became an ICF coach, the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, is a organisation, it's accredited. Coaching is a hugely skilled profession, and there are many guidelines and kind of things that you follow when you become an ICF coach. I got a bit trapped in not feeling like I could share my opinion, because coaching is all around you, the client, whoever we're working with, knowing best. But in doing that, I kind of accidentally, without realising it, felt like I couldn't actually share my opinion about much. And that trapped me because I'm someone that likes to share freely about what I know as well, because I've got 24 years experience. So I actually know that sometimes if we do certain things, you're going to get certain results. But it's also important to balance that with the sense of you as an individual, for example, in a coaching environment, of what do you want, which is what I try to do on this podcast. I'm always trying to spur that on in you. Like, what do you want? Like, let's go make that happen in your way, not in the way of having to do a nice bath at 4 a.m. I mean, you can do that if you want, but how does your life need to be shaped now, having had the changes that you've had? What needs to happen, and what do you want to happen from what you're learning as you go, knowing that we are all going to make mistakes and it's not always going to go to plan, and that's the joy of it all. And I just realised my nails are chipped there. Oh well, it's human. And so that really trapped me as well with how I was expressing myself. And freedom of expression is a huge thing that I've worked on a lot over the years, but also for many of you as well, where you might hold back from saying what you want to say, whether that is the overthinking mind, whether it's self-censorship, whether it's self-consciousness, whether it's low self-esteem, whatever it is. It's really important to clock all these things because it'll be impacting your performance and how you show up in the world. And so I know many things about that, both from my coaching experience, but also from my acting background in terms of expression, and also energy, right? In terms of my fitness background and nutrition and your relationship with these things. So there were many things that I felt like I couldn't talk about anymore that were vital in the idea of you actually fulfilling your potential and being your best self. But within that, I was also judging the concept of being your best, because I felt like I should just be happy. As I don't think it was just being happy as a mum, but it was like, it's kind of just for whatever reason, I just felt like having big ambition and having big visions was wrong. And I think this is why it's so important. We've got to be so careful where we're consuming content and what we're consuming and what we're thinking in relation to the content. Because what also happens online is, if you are trying to figure things out, right, it goes back to this. If you are trying to figure things out and this is you trying to figure things out, you're here, this is you trying to figure things out, and then you're watching content of someone that you think knows more than you, you're going to start to think that they know more than you, and you're going to start to follow what they're saying completely without realising it. And what starts to happen actually is you get even smaller, because you get even more contained. So what you need to also realise is that actually you are, in many ways, the same as them, so that you can listen and understand and come back to what's true about what you want. What's true about what you want and what makes you feel your best and who you are at your best. And if, as individuals, you have been someone who has burnt out forcing that, you're not going to want to do that again. So I also think I probably held back because there is an association, but that by trying to do your best or be your best version of yourself and achieving what you're capable of achieving, it leads to burnout. And it is just not true. The whole point is that you can't lead to burnout, because it's not, you just will not create what you want to create. The whole point is that you enjoy the process of it. The whole point is that you don't create incredible success and hate it. That's the whole point. But if you're also, for example, consuming content from someone who has burnt out, through force of trying to be the best, they're going to have a very negative perception and perspective on being the best version of themselves because it's associated to force and with force. So over time, that slight, tiny consumption of content changes what we think, who we are, and what we do, and who we become. And that slight, ever so slight adjustment takes you off the path from where you were going, where your dreams are, to this, where ironically you've ended up back being that version of yourself, kind of unhappy, probably a bit burnt out, forcing it. Whereas if you just trusted yourself and stayed true to your big visions, no matter how massive they are, you'd end up there. And if you were committed to doing it in a way that you enjoyed the process and you enjoyed what you became as a result, even in the gnarly lessons that you will learn, that success is going to be so fulfilling, so rewarding, and a direct expression of who you are. And that's what we're going to keep exploring this year, because what I realised was that in trying to create success, not even trying to create success, but in trying to create, work and an income that was sustainable, achievable, scalable, all of the things, I was doing it still with this idea that I can't do all the things that I actually really want to do. Because on paper, practically, and in my head, it didn't make sense. And also because online, it's like, well, we need to be seen as a certain thing for marketing. So we end up in a box, yes, again. And so this year, I'm leading truly just from energy. I'm leaning truly into intuition and based on what I know about energy, being an ecosystem, right? Things spark other things off. If you do your workout, you're going to clear your headspace. You're going to have some calm. You're going to then feel more energized for what you're going to do next in the day, rather than it all being about self-loathing, self-hatred and calorie burn. It's, again, all part of this kind of cycle of self-worth and self-esteem. And this is why I'm going to keep harping on about the hidden hierarchies of patriarchy, because it feeds into everything, and it in fact impacts everything, and it impacts how you see people, and it impacts how you respond to life, but it also impacts how we respond to one another. And it's not to say we need to go into situations analysing everyone and analysing ourselves. It's just to enable you to go into a situation to being yourself and actually enjoying it, so you don't come home exhausted having to down a bottle of wine after it, or even during it, or even before it, so that your nervous system is also in a lovely place. And this is how you do keep energy consistent. And this is how you do achieve incredible success, huge success, without burning out, without compromising family, or being a mum, or being a partner, or just being yourself. And it's how you create this success that feels as good as it looks without you becoming someone you are not in the process. It keeps it true to your values, your morals, everything. And I definitely think that for some reason, I didn't think that I could still be ambitious and be a mum. And I think that a lot of it was also to do with how badly impacted I was by the global news over the last couple of years, and the grief that I felt at that, and the choice I had to make last year, just before I found this lump in my neck, to say I cannot live like this anymore. This is costing me more than what it's giving. I'm actually going to run out of money if I keep living like this, and I need to do things differently, because I'm not helping the world here by not being well resourced. And I know how to be well resourced because it's what I do in my job, but I need to give myself permission to be well resourced. And it's what I've always started doing about 5 years ago, was always about, with the online world, when I went online with the pandemic, was always around helping women be well resourced. But it's also about helping men be well resourced, because when men are well resourced and happy as well in relation to us and our partners and our partnerships with them, then everyone is happy and we all thrive. And not in relation to men having more importance, though. This is an equity of importance for women as well. Without it being man-bashing, man-hating, it's all in self-appreciation and appreciation of humans as a whole. Not about the gendered kind of stereotypes or boxes that we are put in. It's to understand one another as humans for who we are and for what we need. And that's what I'm going to keep unpacking this year, because I've been brewing it over the last couple of years, but just realising that if I am really honest, I love my coaching. I still want to work as a coach. I love Club Thrive. I love what's about to happen with Dare to Be Seen. I love doing this podcast, but I also always wanted to be an actor. And when I left drama school a decade ago and I went through my divorce, and it was the hardest time of my whole life. It was hell, but it has given me so much. And I think that I realise now that I'm in a position where if I didn't listen to this urge to also see what's possible with that, I would regret that on my deathbed. Because what this time has given me, a decade ago, I did not want to live anymore. And during this whole process of finding out this lump in my neck, going through the whole diagnosis of it, when there was the seeds of of awareness that it was going to be a cancer diagnosis, I lay in that bath one night and I thought, I do not want to die. I want to see my daughter live out her life fully. And in that moment there, I realised that it was really important for me to live my whole life too. And when my dad died, that just cemented that fact. And I know this is morbid, but it's not morbid actually at all. And I don't know why I said that, because really for me, it has been freeing. And when you have seen both ends of a spectrum with such insane depth, you really understand what it means both to be human, but also to be honest about what you want from your life. So, for example, it's not that I want to go off and be an actor all the time. It's very specific. I'm like, if I want to go and work as an actor, I want to do 1 and 2 very decent projects a year. I want to still be here for as many pickups and drop-offs and school holidays as possible. I want incredible money so I don't have to worry about it, but also because I deserve that because I'm highly skilled. And also I want to enjoy it all. And I want to have all of these different strands of income, not just from a money perspective, because they represent the creative expression that I have always loved with ADHD as a person beyond the labels. I've always loved having lots of different jobs. I've loved it. And I think the whole thing for me as well is where we can start to think online, I can only be one thing because that's how I make money. My experiment this year is that what if I can make that same money, but by allowing myself to fill all the tanks, doing all these different things that everyone says is like, focus on one thing. And it's not just about being cluttered. There is focus and intention on each of these things, but it's not about the money. Because yeah, sure, if I was to sell one single product at like the real focus that I know I could put into it, which is, you know, what I was doing in my in-person coaching at Until in Soho, there was a business coach there that was desperate to get his hands on me to work with him because he knew that I was that kind of person that if I set out to set up a 6-figure in-person coaching practice in Soho, I would do it. But at what cost? And this is exactly the same. I could do that with any of the one things that I sell because they are all insane value and incredible with the transformation. But if I just focused on one, I would be unfulfilled. And for me, when we have incredible capacity as individuals, whether you're creative or whether you're just kind of able to do that, we also do need to organize these things, but we can end up trying to squash what we're capable of creating into an image or a look or a rule or a blueprint based on what someone else has created, because it goes back to this hierarchy of how we see people and what they have created, thinking that they know best. And don't get me wrong, many people do know best, but if you're constantly seeing yourself as that tiny dot and not the big dot, you're forgetting about everything that you have known and learned in your life. And what if actually you know more than the person that is telling you what to do? I'm not saying go around disagreeing with everyone at all. That is not what I'm saying. We need to learn from people too, but it's just take that information and say, how do I want to implement that in my life? So that is what we're going to be exploring more this year. I'm going to share you how I'm structuring my business this year to see how it works. I'm doing it without financial goals. The reason I'm doing it without financial goals, and I'll do a video on this, is that when I had my eating disorder, when you are obsessed with the scales and the weight on the scales, everything becomes about the number on the scales. When you're trying to, I've worked with so many clients over the years when I worked in fitness that were just, you know, their worth was attached to the number on the scales. What I learned is that when you get off the scales and you start to actually live in tune with your body and you face all the fears that you have about food and you face all the fears that you have about your body, you end up living in a way that is much more in tune with yourself. You can still have structure. You face all the fears that you have around being in a different looking body in relation to the hierarchical kind of beauty standards that we have in society. And you get to choose how you want to live based on how you want to feel. And it's from that place I'm in the strongest body I've ever been in. It's also probably the leanest body I've ever been in. And I get to eat what I want, but I'm also not out of control with food. And I'm also not restrictive. And I have been out of control with food. I have been overly restrictive at times. I've been addicted to exercise and I've been obsessed about and fearful of food. I don't have any of these things now because I learned how to not associate my weight with worth. And I'm going to do exactly the same this year with money, because I think there is something in this with, and I'll keep unpacking it, women who have had eating disorders in the past who have gone on to be hyper restrictive in their business growth and career growth out of fear of not being in control, and also out of the fear of how big they will become in success. Because all of this goes back to how we perceive ourselves and and how we see ourselves in relation, not just to other people, but also to ourselves and what we want in our life, right? It goes back to that every single time. If you are constantly seeing yourself as that tiny dot, right, and that big circle feels scary, you're not going to want to become the big circle. And often with food, for example, that's what happens. We get scared of being in that bigger circle, in the bigger body. And the same can happen with money. And the same can happen also with love and self-worth and energy and actually being well-resourced and not exhausted and burnt out all the time. So we must also learn that we can be the same size of these things and have everything that we want. The light body, the bank account, the great relationships, the energy. It doesn't have to always result in burnout. In fact, we don't want it to result in burnout. So my theory this year is that if I let myself follow intuition with the structure and focus I will create, just like I have done with the relationship that I have now with food, where I make sure I eat really well, I exercise, but I don't over-exercise. I rest, but I don't over-rest. I don't allow myself to sink into lethargy and bleh-ness. I think I can do the same with my bank account as what I did with my body. So, and with work, with cash flow. So we will see. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I'm putting it out there and I'll keep unpacking it more and more. But I just believe that when we work completely from self-trust and we let go of this sense of controlling things too much, we need control, we need that structure, but we also want to let go of the results. A bit like when you you need to trust your body to give you the results you want, right? If you were micromanaging every single portion of food that you're eating, every single ounce of exercise that you're doing, you're micromanaging an end result. You're trying to contain your body in a certain way. You're trying so hard to make it look a certain way to the point that you are never going to be happy. When you actually let go of trying to micro control yourself, your body has the space to do what it needs to do to get you the results that you want. And it does require being okay with not exercising all the time. And it does require being okay with not being in a restrictive or an overly comfort eating zone. So there is also, the structures and the work and the discipline almost that has to come in. But there's also a huge sense of freedom. It's not about discipline and force, because that's how we burn out. If we're forcing ourselves to do the things we don't want to do anymore, we're going to burn out. We're going to hate it. So thank you for listening to this week's episode. As I continue to decide how I want to step back out into the world after this time of kind of isolation with cancer treatment, but also being the most alive I've felt in a long time and the most honest. And again, I just want to keep reiterating, this is for everyone. Whether you are a man, a woman, a mum, a dad, you get to decide whether it helps or not. I think I just need to also say that to stop myself from trying to feel like I'm also containing content into a certain box, because this is about opening out the conversation to everyone, to the people that are different to what stereotypes are, and to really acknowledge where we are impacted every single day by the unconscious hidden hierarchies of patriarchy, but not in a way of bra burning, let's go hate everyone. No, it's not about that. It is about equity though. And it benefits everyone when we talk about this stuff and when we work together, when we understand one another, and when we also focus in on the individual challenges that happen in each kind of specific demographic or psychographic or whatever it is, identity, because those challenges are different. Those challenges for a mum are different to a dad. The challenges are different from a woman without children to someone that does have them, So it's up to you, I guess I'm saying. If you want to listen. And if not, that's also okay. And actually, I don't need to worry about that anymore. A bit like the not micromanaging the body. A bit like not micromanaging every single perfectionist thing you're trying to perfection. It doesn't always help. Sometimes we have to let things go. So I hope today has started to scratch the lid also on me being honest about ambition and motherhood. And I hope it does also help those of you in that period of time to feel okay with being ambitious, and ambition not necessarily being about doing more, but being about refined with what you want from your life. This is what it is for me. It's about, actually, I do really want a great career, and I'm going to be really intentional about that because my time is incredibly valuable. But that's very exciting when you own it and when you say, actually, this is what I want. Okay, that's not going to give me that. Okay, I'm going to let that go because I know something else is coming. There's a huge amount of incredible trust that will come too. So anyway, please do come and say hello on socials. Come and follow the podcast, What It Means to Be Human. Do follow the podcast. I promise you that every single episode is going to have something for you that you can take away with a gift from me to you in every single episode to implement in your life, please keep going and taking action from this podcast in some way, whether it is just to be like, oh God, actually tonight I'm just going to close my laptop and watch something fun for the enjoyment of it. You know, are you living? Like, that's the thing, right? How are you spending time? You get to choose how you spend your time. We get to enjoy it. We don't have to just feel like it's closing in on us all the time. And I would love to build this podcast. I would still love to knock Stephen Bartlett off the top spot of Diary of a CEO, if not just to prove that we can be incredibly successful, have amazing things, and still be incredibly human and have space to not have to work 14 hours a day. I mean, it's got to be possible. And the ripple effect is real. So let's just go make it happen, right? Because it's going to impact you better too. So go leave a review, help me spread the word of this podcast. Get involved in the conversation. Come and get involved in the chat, in the comments on here, spurring me on to keep bringing in great guests, interesting conversation, new insights, new ways of thinking, all really about helping you unlock your full human potential without it being about burnout or force. This is really about saying, yeah, well, why shouldn't we go after massive goals? Because actually that's really great for us as people, is to be challenged. And some of us are hungry for that. And it's not to compromise or to sacrifice those relationships that we have with people we love. It's to enhance them and to be there more with them and to really appreciate them. It all goes hand in hand, part of that bigger ecosystem of life. Anyway, thank you for listening. Have an amazing week, and I'll be back next week with a new episode. See you later. Bye.